The lock on the gate was new. It was a heavy, industrial-grade master lock, the kind with a shrouded shackle designed to resist bolt cutters. It gleamed under the cold, blue glare of the single LED security light that our HOA president, Barbara, had installed last month. The light made everything look sterile and hostile, like an interrogation room. My compact front-end loader, a cheerful yellow Kubota I'd bought for Eleanor's garden, sat just on the other side of the chain-link fence, a prisoner in what was laughably called the community overflow parking lot. A piece of cheap, laminated paper was zip-tied to the gate. The text was in that aggressive, all-caps font she favored, the one that always looked like it was screaming at you. Violation. Unauthorized storage of heavy equipment. Vehicle impounded. Contact HOA management for release. Fine. $500 per day. $500 a day. For parking my own machine in a lot I paid dues to maintain, I felt a familiar pressure building behind my eyes. It wasn't a hot, explosive anger. I'd run logistics for the Army Corps of Engineers for 35 years. You can't get hot and explosive when you're coordinating the movement of 100 tons of bridge components into a conflict zone. No, this was different. It was a cold fury. A systems check kind of rage where every emotional response is logged, analyzed for weakness, and filed away. This was a problem to be solved, a logistical knot to be untangled. Barbara had just declared war. She had no idea what that really meant. She thought it was about fines and bylaws and shrill, condescending emails. She thought she was fighting a retired old man who just wanted to plant some roses for his dead wife. Big mistake. Huge. I took out my phone, the screen casting a pale light on my face. I didn't call her. I didn't rattle the gate. I took a picture. I made sure the date and timestamp were visible. I took a picture of the sign, a picture of my loader through the fence, a picture of the new lock. I documented the initial state of the system failure. Every engineer knows you can't fix a problem until you've defined its parameters. And the parameters of this problem had just become exquisitely clear. Let me tell you about Barbara. Barbara was our HOA president, a title she wore with the gravity of a Roman emperor. She was a woman poured into expensive athleisure wear that had never seen a bead of sweat. Her face was a smooth, immobile mask of Botox and fillers, her lips permanently pursed in a state of perpetual disapproval. She drove a white Range Rover the size of a small tank, and she patrolled our quiet suburban streets with the focused intensity of a predator drone. Her voice was a purr when she was getting her way, and a screech when she wasn't. She smelled of chemical-sweet perfume and entitlement. I'd lived here for 20 years. Eleanor and I bought the house because of the big backyard and the quiet cul-de-sac. It was our forever home. After she passed 2 years ago, the quiet became louder. The silence in the house was a physical presence. So, I decided to finish the project she'd always dreamed of. A tiered botanical garden in the backyard, a place of peace, filled with every flower she'd ever loved. It was a massive undertaking, requiring retaining walls, irrigation systems, and moving a lot of earth. It required the Kubota. The Kubota was my partner in this project. It smelled of diesel and warm hydraulic fluid, a comforting, industrious smell that cut through the cloying scent of the neighborhood's perfectly manicured gardenias. My hands, calloused from a lifetime of work, felt right on its controls. It was a tool, but it was more than that. It was the instrument I was using to build a monument to my wife. I was semi-retired, taking on occasional consulting gigs, mostly to keep my mind sharp. My specialty was complex logistical problem-solving. Need to move a hospital's worth of MRI machines from Germany to a field base in Afghanistan? without them getting damaged or delayed, I was your man. I approached every problem the same way. Assess, analyze, plan, execute. No wasted motion, no emotional outbursts. Just the calm, methodical application of process. Barbara and I had our first run-in a month prior. I had a delivery of flagstone, 2 pallets worth, dropped at the curb. The delivery truck was gone in 15 minutes. I was out there with the Kubota, moving the stone to my backyard, when her white Range Rover slid to a silent stop beside me. Her window whispered down. "Franklin," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. She was the only person who called me Franklin. To everyone else, I was Frank. "Barbara," I replied, not turning off the machine, letting its steady diesel rumble fill the space between us. "That is an unsightly piece of industrial equipment, darling," she purred, gesturing a perfectly manicured hand, its acrylic nails clicking softly against the window frame. "It really lowers the tone of the neighborhood." "It's a tool," I said. "It'll be gone when the job is done." "And when will that be?" she asked, a sharp edge entering her voice. "The bylaws are quite clear about construction equipment. 24 hours is the maximum allowable time for it to be visible from the street." I knew the bylaws better than she did. I'd read them cover to cover when we first moved in. "The bylaw applies to commercial construction projects, Barbara. This is a private landscaping project, and the machine is parked on my property." Her smile became a thin, bloodless line. It was the smile of a person who had never been told no and didn't care for the experience. "We'll see about that," she hissed, and her window whispered back up. She drove off. The next day, the first letter arrived, a formal warning. I filed it. A week later, another letter. $100 fine. I filed that one too, right next to the first. I wasn't going to engage with her on her terms. Engaging her directly was like trying to reason with a feedback loop. All you get is a louder screech. The overflow lot was the key. It was a gravel and weed patch at the end of our cul-de-sac, technically HOA common property. It was where people parked their boats or RVs for a day or two while they got them ready for a trip. It was unused 99% of the time. To avoid another confrontation, I'd started parking the Kubota there at the end of each day, well out of sight from the street. It was a concession, a tactical retreat to maintain operational peace. Apparently, she saw it not as a compromise, but as an encroachment on her territory. And now, here we were. My machine, a hostage, a $500 a day ransom note, a declaration of war. I went back inside my quiet, empty house. The plans for Eleanor's garden were spread out on the dining room table, weighted down with coffee mugs. Blueprints, soil composition reports, planting schedules. A multi-phase project plan that would have made my old commanding officer proud. I pushed them aside. I went to my office, a room that smelled of old paper, WD-40, and pine sap from the model ships I built. From the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, I pulled out a fresh, empty notebook, a black, hardcover, legally ruled notebook, and a new pen. On the first page, I wrote in neat, block letters, Project Barbara. This was no longer a personal dispute. It was a mission, and every mission begins with intelligence gathering. I spent the next 2 days in a state of controlled, methodical rage. I didn't answer her calls. I ignored her smug, gloating emails which I printed and added to a file. Instead, I became a ghost. I started with the HOA's own governing documents. I downloaded every CC and R, every bylaw, every meeting minute from the past 10 years from the HOA's terrible, barely functional website. I read them all. I highlighted. I cross-referenced. I made notes. I was analyzing the enemy's operating manual. Most of it was boilerplate nonsense, unenforceable and vague, but it was the framework she operated within. I needed to understand the machine before I could dismantle it. Then I moved on to public records, the county assessor's office, the recorder of deeds, the planning and zoning commission. I spent hours staring into the humming, flickering screen of a microfiche reader, the smell of dust and aging acetate filling my nostrils. I was looking for pressure points, for inconsistencies, for the single loose thread that, when pulled, would cause her entire tapestry of power to unravel. I mapped the entire subdivision. I pulled the original plat maps from 1978. I cross-referenced them with current satellite imagery and property tax records. I created a dossier on every property on our street, including Barbara's. I learned that her pristine lawn was watered by an illegal tap into the HOA's main irrigation line. I learned that the new fence she'd had installed around her property encroached on her neighbor's land by 18 inches. Small things, levers, but not the main one. Not yet. My most valuable source of intelligence, however, was not a document. It was a man. Mr. Henderson lived 2 doors down. He was 84, a retired mailman who had walked the same route for 40 years. He was the man who noticed things. He sat on his porch every day, rain or shine, and he watched the neighborhood breathe. He saw every car that came and went, every delivery, every argument. He was a living, breathing surveillance camera. I brought him a thermos of coffee and a bag of the donuts he liked. We sat on his porch swing, the chains creaking a gentle rhythm. "She's a piece of work, that one," he said, after I explained the situation with my Kubota. He didn't need much explanation. He'd seen the new lock go on. Been running this place like her own little fiefdom since her husband got that big promotion. For the next hour, he gave me the entire history of Barbara's reign. The family with the basketball hoop she'd fined into submission until they finally took it down. The young couple she'd hounded for weeks because their wind chimes were, in her words, a source of acoustic pollution. The time she tried to get the HOA to pay to have a healthy 100-year-old oak tree cut down because it dropped leaves into her swimming pool. She gets away with it because no one wants the headache, Mr. Henderson said, dunking his donut. It's easier to just pay the fine or take down the bird feeder. People are busy. They've got jobs, kids. They don't have the time or the energy to fight a woman who has nothing better to do than invent new rules. She bullies the board, too, he added. There's David, quiet fellow, an accountant. He tries to stand up to her in the meetings, but she just shouts him down. The other 2, they're her little puppets. They do whatever she says. I filed that away. David the accountant, a potential ally. Did you know, Mr. Henderson said, leaning in conspiratorially, that the fence company that does all the work around here, the ones who put up that new gate on the lot, it's owned by her brother-in-law. My pen paused over my notebook. Is that so? That wasn't just a lever. That was a potential fulcrum. I thanked Mr. Henderson for his time and his intel. As I walked back to my house, the cold fury inside me was beginning to crystallize. It was taking shape, forming a plan. A beautiful, intricate, multi-phase plan. The kind of plan that required precision engineering. The turning point came on the 3rd day, in the musty basement of the county records building. I was looking at the original subdivision plans from 1978, the ones that laid out every plot, every road, every utility line. I was specifically examining the area designated as the overflow lot. On the current maps, it was listed as HOA Common Area. But on this old, brittle blueprint, it was different. There, in faint, spidery script, was a designation I hadn't seen on any of the modern documents. A dotted line ran straight through the middle of the lot, from the street to the utility substation behind our houses, and next to it, the words, 30-foot public utility and emergency vehicle access easement. I felt a slow smile spread across my face. It was the smile of a demolitions expert who has just found the single load-bearing pillar that will bring the whole building down. It was beautiful. The lot wasn't just common property. It was, and always had been, a legal right-of-way. The fence was an illegal obstruction. The gate was an illegal obstruction. Her impounding my vehicle there wasn't just an HOA violation. It was a violation of county and state law. She hadn't just impounded my Kubota in her little kingdom. She had illegally blocked a public and emergency access route. This was my nuclear option. This was the leverage that would not just win the battle, but end the war. I paid the clerk $5 for a high-resolution, certified copy of the plat map. It felt like I was buying a winning lottery ticket. The paper was thick in my hands, heavy with the weight of trust funds and legal authority. Now the planning phase could truly begin. Phase 1 was to be a demonstration of capability. It was to be loud, precise, and conducted with overwhelming force. It was designed to sow psychological terror and confusion. Phase 1 was the recovery of my Kubota. I went home and made 3 calls. The first was to my old friend, Mike, who owned the biggest heavy towing and recovery company in the state. We'd worked together on a few disaster relief jobs over the years, moving debris and heavy equipment. "Mike," I said, "I have a situation. I need a recovery crew, and I need them to be professional, fast, and very, very quiet until they're not." "What are we moving, Frank?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "A compact front-end loader." "Easy day. Where is it?" "It's behind an illegally constructed gate on an illegally obstructed public access easement." There was a pause, and then a low chuckle. "Frank, are you getting into trouble in your old age?" "I'm getting out of it, Mike. I need your biggest rotator crane, a flatbed, and your best crew. I also need it done at 3 o'clock in the morning." "3 a.m.? He whistled. "That's premium time. I'll pay it, and a bonus for every crew member. Discretion is paramount." "You got it. Send me the coordinates. We'll be there." The second call was to the county sheriff's non-emergency line. I explained, calmly and politely, that I was a property owner who would be exercising my legal right to access a public easement that had been illegally obstructed. I told them the time and place. I said that given the litigious nature of the person who had erected the obstruction, I would feel much safer if an officer could be present to simply keep the peace. I emailed the dispatcher a copy of the certified plat map and my driver's license. After a brief consultation with a supervisor, they agreed to send a patrol car. Civil standby. Perfect. The third call was to David, the accountant from the HOA board. I found his number in the HOA directory. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice hesitant. "David, my name is Frank. I'm your neighbor at the end of the cul-de-sac. I believe we have a mutual interest in restoring some sanity to our neighborhood's governance." I told him what I had found. I told him what I was planning for that night. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing. "She's been running the finances into the ground," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. "The books are a mess. Contracts with no competitive bids. I think she's stealing." but I could never prove it. Let's prove it, I said. After tonight, she'll be off balance, rattled. That's when we move on to phase 2. He agreed to meet me the next day. He was in. The first domino had tipped. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my darkened living room, sipping black coffee, and watched the clock. At 2:45 a.m., I saw the first sign of movement. A single sheriff's cruiser pulled silently to the curb a few houses down, killing its lights. The deputy, a young woman with a calm, professional demeanor, got out and gave me a slight nod. At 2:58 a.m., the cavalry arrived. It was a beautiful sight. A massive, gleaming white rotator crane truck, its chrome brilliant even in the dim light, followed by a lowboy flatbed. They moved with a quiet, professional purpose that I deeply appreciated. Mike had sent his best. The crew of 3 men, all dressed in clean, black uniforms, didn't say a word. They got out, surveyed the scene, and began to work. This was the part I wanted Barbara to see. This was the shock and awe. The rotator positioned itself. Outriggers extended with a soft, hydraulic hiss, planting themselves firmly on the asphalt. The massive crane arm, capable of lifting a semi-truck, rose into the night sky like the hand of God. The sounds were muted, but powerful. The low hum of the diesel engine, the click of safety latches, the soft groan of steel under tension. Then, the noise began. One of the crewmen approached the gate not with bolt cutters, but with a portable plasma cutter. With a deafening hiss and a shower of brilliant white sparks that lit up the entire cul-de-sac, he sliced through the hinges of the gate. Not the lock, the hinges. It was a statement. The entire gate was removed in less than 30 seconds and laid carefully on the grass. Lights started flicking on in the houses around us. Faces appeared in windows. I saw Mr. Henderson on his porch, wrapped in a bathrobe, a massive grin on his face. And then, the main event. Barbara's house. Her bedroom light snapped on. A moment later, her front door flew open. She stood on her porch, a silk robe clutched around her, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. The smooth Botox mask was gone, replaced by a contorted snarl. "What is going on?" she shrieked, her voice echoing in the pre-dawn stillness. "What are you doing?" I walked calmly to the edge of my driveway. The deputy moved to intercept her as she stormed across her lawn. Ma'am, I need you to stay back," the deputy said, her voice firm but even. "This is a civil matter." Civil matter? They are destroying HOA property. I am the president. I demand you arrest them, she screeched, pointing a trembling, acrylic-nailed finger at the crew. By now, the crane's hook was descending. The crew had attached a 4-point lifting harness to my Kubota. With a gentle, impossibly smooth motion, the crane lifted the 2-ton machine into the air. It swung gracefully over the fence, a yellow pendulum against the dark sky, and was lowered onto the flatbed with barely a sound. The crew immediately began strapping it down. The entire recovery operation, from arrival to securing the vehicle, took less than 15 minutes. It was a masterclass in efficiency. "Ma'am, this gentleman has a certified county plat map showing this is a public access easement," the deputy explained patiently, holding up a copy I had given her. "Your fence and gate are an illegal obstruction. He is within his rights to remove the obstruction to recover his property." Barbara just stared, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She was processing a system failure she had never anticipated. Her authority, which she believed to be absolute, was evaporating in a shower of plasma sparks and the quiet hum of a crane. You can't," she stammered. "I will sue you. I will ruin you." I just looked at her. I didn't say a word. I just gave her a small, tight smile. The crane arm retracted, the outriggers pulled in, and the trucks started their engines. As the flatbed carrying my liberated Kubota pulled away, I gave the driver a crisp salute. He honked the horn twice in response. Barbara stood in the middle of the street in her silk robe, illuminated by the flashing lights of the sheriff's cruiser, screaming threats at a disappearing taillight. Phase 1 was complete. It was a resounding success. The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. The mangled, hingeless gate lying on the side of the road was a monument to Barbara's defeat. My phone started ringing. It was other neighbors, people I barely knew, calling to thank me. They spoke in hushed, excited tones, like prisoners whispering about a jailbreak. I met with David at a coffee shop downtown. He looked like a man who hadn't slept, but his eyes were shining with a newfound resolve. He brought a briefcase full of papers. "You were right," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "She's rattled. She called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow night. The agenda is sanctions against rule-breaking homeowner and destruction of HOA property." "Good," I said. "She's walking right into the trap." "Here's what I found," he said, opening the folder. It was full of invoices and bank statements. The landscaping company, her brother-in-laws. They've been billing the HOA for common area maintenance at 3 times the market rate. And look at this. An invoice for $20,000 for the security gate installation. I got a quote from another company. It should have cost $5,000, tops. It was textbook embezzlement, using her position to enrich her family with community funds. "This is our ammunition for Phase 2, I said. "We're not just going to defend ourselves at that meeting. We're going to stage a coup." We spent the rest of the day preparing. I called my lawyer, the son of my old army buddy. He was sharp, aggressive, and loved a good fight. He drafted a formal cease and desist letter to the HOA, demanding the immediate removal of the rest of the illegal fence and citing the specific county codes they were violating. He also prepared a lawsuit against Barbara personally for willful misconduct and tortious interference, which is a fancy way of saying she knowingly and maliciously messed with my property. David and I, meanwhile, prepared a presentation. We scanned the invoices, the bank statements, the competing quotes. We created a clear, simple slideshow that laid out the financial malfeasance in undeniable terms. We also made 100 copies of a summary packet, including the certified plat map, the relevant county codes, and the most damning invoices. One for every homeowner we expected to be at the meeting. The next evening, the community clubhouse was packed. The air was thick with tension and the smell of cheap coffee. Barbara was at the front of the room, flanked by her 2 pet board members. She had regained her composure. Her face once again a serene mask of Botox, but her eyes were like chips of ice. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. I took a seat in the front row, with David on one side and my lawyer, looking sharp in a tailored suit, on the other. Mr. Henderson and a half-dozen other neighbors who had pledged their support sat right behind us, a silent show of force. Barbara banged her gavel. "This emergency meeting of the board is now in session," she announced, her voice tight. "The first and only item on the agenda is the egregious violation of our community standards by the resident at Lot 42, Franklin Miller." She launched into a tirade, her voice rising with melodramatic indignation. She talked about the sanctity of private property, the importance of rules, the wanton destruction of the beautiful new security gate. She painted me as a rogue, a menace who threatened the very fabric of their peaceful community. When she was finally done, she pointed at me. The board proposes an immediate fine of $25,000 for property damage and a lien against Mr. Miller's home until it is paid. All in favor? Her two cronies raised their hands immediately. All opposed? She asked, a smug smirk on her face. David raised his hand. The motion passes 3-1, she declared. Now, if there is no further— Point of order, Madam President, my lawyer said, standing up. His voice filled the room, calm and authoritative. Barbara glared at him. Who are you? I am Mr. Miller's legal counsel, and you are about to preside over a meeting in which this board has taken an action that is not only illegal but fraudulent. I would advise you to listen very carefully. He walked to the front of the room. Firstly, he said, the gate you refer to was an illegal obstruction of a public access easement, in violation of County Ordinance 113.8. Mr. Miller was within his rights to remove it. Any fine or lien based on that action is null and void. In fact, we will be suing you, the board, and you, Barbara, personally, for damages related to this matter. A murmur went through the crowd. Barbara's face paled slightly. Secondly, my lawyer continued, my client has asked for a few minutes to present some information to the homeowners. Information that is directly relevant to the financial health and legal standing of this association. Before Barbara could object, I walked to the front and connected my laptop to the projector. The first image that flashed on the screen was the 1978 plat map, the easement clearly highlighted in red. This, I said, my voice steady, is the legal survey of this land. The lot where my equipment was held hostage is a public right-of-way. The fence and gate are illegal. They have exposed this HOA to massive legal liability. Every fine levied for parking there is invalid. The murmuring grew louder. I clicked to the next slide. It was the $20,000 invoice for the gate. This is what the HOA paid for that illegal gate, I said. Then I clicked again, showing the $5,000 quote from a reputable competitor. And this is what it should have cost. Gasps rippled through the room. For the next 10 minutes, with David providing the financial details, I laid it all bare. The inflated landscaping contracts, the no-bid process, the checks written to her brother-in-law's company, signed by Barbara herself. We showed them the money trail, clear as day. It was a systematic siphoning of their dues into her family's pockets. With each slide, Barbara's composure cracked a little more. The serene mask shattered like cheap glass. Her face went from white to red. "Akriwara, these are lies! Fabrications!" she shrieked, jumping to her feet. "This is a personal attack. He's a disgruntled rule-breaker trying to deflect from his own actions." "Are they lies, Barbara?" David asked, his voice quiet but firm. "Is this your signature on this check for $7,000 for tree trimming services that were never performed?" He put the canceled check on the projector. Her signature was clear as day. The room erupted. People were yelling, demanding answers. Her two pet board members looked terrified, trying to shrink into their chairs. It was in that moment of chaos that the back doors of the clubhouse opened. Two people walked in. A man and a woman, dressed in plain business attire. They were detectives from the county's Economic Crimes Unit. They walked to the front of the room. "Barbara," the lead detective said, his voice cutting through the noise, "we need to talk to you about allegations of fraud and embezzlement." Barbara's meltdown was spectacular. A full-blown, screeching, denial-laced implosion. She accused me. She accused David. She accused the detectives of being part of some grand conspiracy to unseat her. She incriminated herself with every word. It all ended with a sound I will savor for the rest of my days. The sharp, satisfying click of handcuffs locking around her wrists. They led her out, still screaming, past all the neighbors she had terrorized for years. Nobody said a word. They just watched. The aftermath was swift and total. Barbara was charged with multiple felonies. Her brother-in-law was charged as a co-conspirator. Faced with the mountain of evidence we had compiled, they both pleaded guilty. Barbara was sentenced to 3 years in state prison. The court ordered her to pay full restitution to the HOA, plus penalties. Her house was sold to cover the costs. Her husband, who claimed to know nothing, quietly divorced her and moved away. The illegal fence and the remains of the gate were torn down by a crew of neighborhood volunteers, led by Mr. Henderson. David was elected the new HOA president. His first act was to hold a community-wide meeting to rewrite the bylaws, stripping out all the petty, controlling rules Barbara had put in place. The reign of terror was over. The settlement from my lawsuit against the HOA and Barbara personally was substantial. After my lawyer took his fee, I was left with a significant sum. I used it to finish Eleanor's garden. It's beautiful now. A quiet place of stone and flowers humming with bees, a testament to her memory. But I had money left over, a lot of it. So I worked with David and the new board. We used the remaining funds, along with the restitution money Barbara was forced to pay back, to establish a nonprofit foundation, the Community Advocacy Fund. Its sole purpose is to provide pro bono legal aid to homeowners in our state who are being victimized by predatory HOAs. Sometimes, when I'm sitting in the garden, I think about Barbara. I think about her arrogance, her certainty that her power was absolute. She saw a quiet, grieving old man and assumed he was weak. She never considered that quiet is not weakness. Sometimes, quiet is just the sound of a plan coming together with precision engineering. She picked a fight over a small yellow tractor, and in doing so, triggered a systems failure cascade that cost her everything. A valuable lesson, I think. Never, ever underestimate the quiet ones. We're the ones who keep notebooks,